What do you think holds people back from reaching their full potential?
An unwillingness to be bored, um, because an unwillingness to embrace mundanity is more than that. Because bored is a bit superficial, but like to truly do things so many times as to become expert, it just requires you to tolerate extreme mundanity. I think sometimes when people watch experts in any field, it doesn't matter who you're watching, they look at them and they think, oh, either it was kind of some kind of inbuilt innate thing that you were born with, or that it came to them easily, instead of imagining the number of dull repetitions, the way they broke down their craft into tiny pieces and then perfected tiny piece after tiny piece until it became something that was more magnificent as a whole. So that's it for me. I know it's not the only thing, but if, in terms of the most common obstacle for most people, they just get bored with how boring it is to become brilliant at something.
Well, people have a hard time like embracing the journey, right? Because I think we're in this world where we're just chasing, chasing, chasing dopamine, 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 and it's hard to like put a number on like the mundane stuff, right? It's hard to see if we're actually achieving. Like, how can people like get good at just sitting in that boring stuff and embracing the journey on their way to greatness?
I think the embracing kind of the dopamine hit part of it is a bit of it. I think some of it is simply that not everybody connects the boring things to their big picture. I think people expect that greatness requires a more turbulent, and because so many people who do brilliant things have great stories to tell about their life and the obvious lumpiness of their success and these amazing pivotal moments. But the truth is that most people who've achieved a measure of success in anything forget to mention the boring parts because they're not good for storytelling. I talk a little bit about in my basketball career when I first started. I would go in a gym and with my coach, I would just do pivots. And again, this is incredibly dull, even telling you this. I would catch the ball, turn back, pass the ball, catch the ball, turn back. I would never put the ball in the hole. I would never attempt to dribble, catch, turn. I remember spending hours doing that. 10 minutes of a practice, of an individual practice would be just that. It's not a good story, right? But it helps to illustrate. That's why when people talked about my obvious lack of athletic ability, yet somehow this great fundamentals tag that came along with me, the great fundamentals was hours of doing boring stuff really well. That was it.
I think one of the other things that people struggle with when it comes to their potential is like lack of control, um, and feeling like they can't control their outcomes, they can't control their future. Was there ever a time in your life that comes to mind where you felt powerless and out of control? And if so, how did you combat that?
I mean, I think it's hard not to, even now, feels out of control in some dimensions. We APS Intelligence, my company, we work with clients who are often in distress of one kind or another, having difficulties of one kind or another. And we enter these environments with the idea that we're there to help change. And we suddenly realize immediately that whilst we may have been brought in by a CEO or some member of the C-suite, there are 1,000 things that we just can't control within that organization. We can't control, I don't know, tariffs on the international front. We can't control HR policy. We can't control the differences in geographies of some of the laws and things like that. And so what we've done, and I think is a good lesson for anybody, is to just say, acknowledge all the stuff that's going on, and then say, here's the stuff I can, this is not my work. This is, lots of people have done this, right? The idea of, here's the stuff I can control. Here's the stuff I can influence. I'm going to pick my favorite from the control and my favorite from the influence, and that's where I'm going to start. Just there. That's where I'm going to devote all my excess energy, all the thoughts that I might have in this space, rather than we often love to get, I think lots of people like to get fixated in the stuff they can't control because it halts progress without it being your fault. It's not my fault. I can't move. Doug hasn't given me X, so I can't do anything about that. So it makes it all you or external. Meanwhile, I'm the one who's still stuck.
Right, right. And I think a lot of what you talk about is is so important for controlling what you can in that, specifically like cultivating your own values and principles and like staying true to them no matter what. um like how can people begin to like cultivate like their own principles and habits and turn that into success even when their outlook is unpredictable?
I think one of the challenges with that is that most people don't spend any time doing kind of concerted, robust introspection. So when you ask people about, understanding your values and your principles, because it is anchoring, I think it is really helpful in a world where there's other uncertainty. They've no idea. And so I think the first thing you can do is ask yourself, all right, who am I? What do I stand for? What are the things that are important to me? How am I going to work those out? Some of them will come to you more obviously, but even then you've got to interpret them. So, the number of men, it is mostly men that I meet, senior people in workplaces, where you talk to them and they'll talk about they're direct and honest is their thing. They're direct and honest. And you see how that is received by the world around them, whether it's the organization or more broadly. And they're received as jerks because they are jerks, because they don't understand that their direct and honest comes across to other people as cruel, thoughtless, uncivil, careless. And so introspection is not just a job of saying, I'm going to pick the labels of the things that I understand to be true of me. It's testing to see how other people receive that stuff. You won't necessarily always change it, but at least you should know.
Yeah, no, I think one of the big issues now is this world we're just wired to like kind of fit in with people, right? And chase trends and chase what other people are doing for the sake of like being liked and fitting in. I mean, you see that on a personal and professional landscape. And then people lose themselves. And I think they end up becoming miserable like 5 to 10 years down the road because they've completely like changed into somebody they don't like based on other people's opinions and values and stuff. Like how have you navigated like remaining authentic to yourself in a world where it kind of teaches you to do the opposite?
I think I bear in mind always that flexing to accommodate for the people around me doesn't have to involve completely transforming myself. Most of us have this sense when we're in a certain space that I could say this, but what's the impact it will have? And sometimes you say, I don't care. I'm just going to say it regardless of the impact. And sometimes you'll say, you know what, because I have this larger point or this bigger goal in mind, maybe I don't want to blow the minds of everybody in this room by saying this word or that word. So I think it's that. If you understand what you're trying to get in this world, I think it's easier to understand how much and how to flex in the moment to moment. I have this mantra that I keep in mind always. This idea of do I want to be right now, or do I want to win in the long term? Do I want to win in the long term, or do I want to be right now? And I think about it all the time because that often dictates the next thing I'm going to say. It often dictates how I'm going to try and present myself to a group of people. Because authenticity in and of itself has never been licensed to be an asshole. You know what I mean? It's not just I'll do anything I want. That's different. That's vindictive. It's almost like identity vindictiveness.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to your original point, and like I guess like kind of like the title of your newest book of it's not magic. Like there's no quick fix. Like you have to like embrace the suck. You have to embrace the long game and win long term. Like it doesn't matter if you win today and tomorrow. What matters is can you like just win over a period of time.
That's exactly it. I mean, the reason that I'm so excited about this book is because I want people to realize that this is not something bestowed on you by your parents. It is not something genetically passed down through the ages. Almost everything that makes great leaders is stuff that anyone can learn. And they can learn it, they can choose to use it consistently or not. And to me, the examples we have out there of people who might be roundly looked at as poor quality leaders for one reason or another, it is not because they're incapable. They simply looked at the effort required to do the right things consistently and decided that the people they're supposed to care about and care for and lead are not worth the effort. So that's why this is brilliant, this idea that, yeah, anyone from anywhere, anyone from any background can do these things if you're willing to build up a few skills.
When I think it comes back to, there's an old quote I heard years ago that's kind of stuck with me. It's like, leader of one, you can lead many. If you can't lead one, you can't lead any, or something like that, where it's like you have to like work on yourself and come up with your own North Star. Otherwise, like no one will authentically follow you.
Yeah, I mean, what you're suggesting, I think, is perhaps one of the hardest things, right? Many leaders who lead poorly, there is an underlying sense of their self, if not their self-loathing, certainly an absence of true understanding of self. And that does lead, I think, to pernicious, cruel leaders being out there, because it's hard to have an authentic presence if what you see when you look at yourself doesn't appeal and you've never made the effort to change it. It's hard to do perceptive listening if your own words are somehow even wounding to you. It's hard to be vulnerable if you're so anxious and kind of susceptible to the perceptions of others that you're unwilling to show that you don't know stuff. So all of this is, these are principles in the book that are easy to follow as long as you've done a bit of self-examination and have been willing to look at the bits of you that might disappoint. If you haven't done that, then I don't think any growth is going to be possible in any dimension, because you'll constantly work against yourself. The brain is a remarkable thing, and left untrained will lie to you on a regular basis. Whether it's, and not for your own good either.
We talk a lot about communication on the podcast and the importance of it and different ways to kind of enhance that. And I think one of the biggest things that you kind of just touched on is that people struggle with the way they talk to themselves. And if you talk to yourself in a really poor way, I mean, that's just going to indirectly come out in other areas. How can you like train your mind or train yourself to like just stop with the negative thinking and talk to yourself in a way that's going to be more uplifting and can lead to being a high performer?
So this is probably one of the biggest things I find when I'm coaching people. I'm constantly saying, kind of telling them back, reflecting back the things that they've said. And is that really what you meant? Did you mean it to be that cruel about yourself? Did you mean it to be that callous about yourself? And I think one of the things we have to do is being really clear. I'm going to listen to myself. Those people who constantly attribute their success to luck, listen to yourself. Is it really true that you got to this position and it's just lucky? It's not true. Don't say that. It's not useful. It's not helpful for you or the people listening to you. I think you have to ask the people around you as well. People who care about you, partners, really good friends, and colleagues that have known you for a while, to look out for your language and say why. Don't just say, yeah, look out for my language. Tell them that you're working on something. You want to be a better leader, and this is a part of that. You can help me out by pointing out when my language is not accurate, when it's not eloquent, and when it's unkind, whether it be to others or to me. I think that's what you do. You utilize a close group of friends in your network, and we have to attune our ear as well to the things we say about ourselves that is unhelpful. Bearing in mind, by the way, I think there are some people for which this doesn't apply, because the way they talk to themselves is always grandiose. It is always telling them that they're brilliant and that they're unique and that they've got the best everything. But I'm talking about the other 90% of people who really have a tendency to undersell themselves, even to themselves.
Yeah, that you brought up a really interesting point, which I honestly, I mean, I've thought about, but not like really it hit home with me until you said that. Like, there's certain people that are just delusional, and they are like, they have a hard time like telling themselves the truth. It's like they're 200 pounds overweight and they're like, oh, I'm healthy, right? Or, they're constantly putting down somebody at work and like, oh, I'm a great boss. Like, how can people come to like some area of like nuance there where they're being, optimistic about themselves. They're not trashing themselves on a regular basis, but they're being realistic about the situation, and they're not being grandiose or delusional or certain things like that.
I think part of the challenge is that where privilege and entitlement and power meet insecurity and anxiety, you will get exactly the kind of person you just described, because they will be in their mind a bit of it's not quite delusion, but they will be constructing a reality which is palatable to their subconscious, their unconscious. And they're not likely to be the people who come up to you and say, hey, can you give me a bit of insight? And if you do give them feedback, they're unlikely to be the people who think it's real or are willing to take it on board. I would tend to say that that is a job for professionals. And if you've got somebody in your life like that, whether it's a manager or hopefully not a partner, then you have to recognize that your psychological and perhaps other safety is at the whim of somebody whose anxiety can make them create an entire new world around them. And again, we're not talking about a huge group of people, but unfortunately it is a group of people who can end up in positions of extreme power. So the best thing you can do is you be aware of you, continue your path to excellence, and find yourself a way through or around that kind of leader.
And I think it comes back to this, like, the concept of failure too, and how like people in general view failure, and that their ego kind of protects them from admitting they failed. And I think, it's one of the greatest references is professional sports. It's like you, for instance, like let's just say there's like 0.5 seconds left, you're down two, you go to shoot a 3-pointer, you give it your best to make the three, you miss. What's the crowd do? They boo, right? And it's like, what do they think? You just went up there and tried to miss the shot? It's like, no, I guarantee you intentionally tried to make the shot. And I just think that that's kind of a good metaphor for like life and failure, is that people are wired to view failure as something so negative. And what happens, kind of going back to your example, which was, a bit more extreme as far as like the grandiose nature of people, is that people could be blatantly doing the wrong thing and getting feedback from other people. And yet, because of their fear of failure, they're afraid to admit that they were wrong, because they're like, oh, like these people are going to look at me in a negative way. But yet these people are looking at you way more negatively and also losing respect for you, because you don't have the guts to just say, you know what, like I was wrong. Because I think people miss that because of this concept of the fear of failure.
Yeah, I think a fear of failure is pervasive for lots of people because we live in a world where you are only as good as your last success. And yet your entire character can be characterized by one failure. That's part of the challenge. When you win, it's super temporary. This success defines you in this moment, but next year or when you come back next week, it's like clean slate. But your failure today, it sits like a badge on your shoulder, and that's part of the problem. So for those people who are driven by that fear of failure, all I can say to you is that success is inherently lumpy. There is no one who has achieved any remarkable level of success without having this pathway that is circuitous and full of bounces, dead cat bounces where they got it dead wrong and had to claw their way back. There is no successful athlete who hasn't had his, her, or her kicked by a better athlete on a better day. There is no good team that hasn't had the same happen to it. So embrace the fact that if you haven't failed, you've probably not aimed high enough. Embrace it. Look around and ask, where have you failed? And then when you do, the best thing you can do is to say, I screwed up. I misstepped. I'm sorry. And then promise not to repeat that if it's a controllable error.
Do any failures of yours come to mind that helped shape you more than any like big win of yours?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, anybody who knows my athletic career knows that it was fairly average anyway. But what I would say is that I remember, even as you were talking about failure before, instantly this came to my head. We were on the road in Toronto. I was with Orlando. That was kind of my heyday, and I'd been playing very well. I was playing that well that day, and and then, I'm the one with the ball in my hands to make the last second shot closer to the basket, and I get fouled on the way to the basket. I was an okay free throw shooter, I think 70% or something, maybe less than that. And I made one and missed one. We end up losing. I remember just walking off the court and thinking, like, the weight of the world. In my case, the crowd cheered when I missed. And one of my assistant coaches, Brian, came up to me and he said, look, I know right now you're probably devastated, but just know that you've won more games for us than you've lost. I was like, that was really helpful in that moment. It didn't stop the pain and the sting of losing then, but it put into context what had happened. It put into context. I failed exams in the past. I failed all kinds of stuff. And I think sometimes you have to take failure and take it out of this moment and put it into context and say, what am I going to do next?
You brought up a really great point, having that assistant coach to kind of help you zoom out a bit and look at it objectively, right? Um, do you think that that's what people need, is they need these people that are in their corner to kind of help lift them up when they're going through failure? Because a lot of times, like, it would have been easy for that assistant coach to be like, man, you suck. I can't believe you missed that shot. I mean, it could have easily gone the other way, right?
And he was, you know what, he was a good man. And I still didn't know what he was going to say as he came up to me. I didn't know if it was going to be the reassuring thing or the opposite. But do you need someone like that? It's helpful to have someone like that. I don't think many of us seek out that person. We hope that person will be in our ecosystem. I say seek them out. I have this concept called a cabinet, which I talk about in my last book, which is this idea that you instead of, when you meet compelling people, you're watching them at a conference, you see them in a networking event, you see them in a meeting. Instead of going, oh yeah, they must be really cool, talk to them and say, look, I think you're brilliant. Could I talk to you a little bit? Sometimes it goes to nothing, and sometimes they become a person in your orbit. Seek out these people. But more than that, if you don't have these people, you can still ask yourself the question, how does this failure sit in the scheme of my life, not just in this moment? And how am I going to respond to it? And I can tell you right now, for every failure of any large magnitude, giving yourself time to mope for a moment is always a good idea. Those people who think they should just wash it off and get on with it, even if even if you've lost a game today and you have another game tomorrow, you lost a pitch today and you've got another pitch tomorrow, give yourself 5 minutes to say, feel sorry for yourself. Then you wipe it away and you say, right, what am I going to do to make sure the same mistakes are not made again?
Well, and you brought up something that I think, people do, and I've done it before. It's like you suppress your emotions, just bury it. And you're like, oh, like if I don't feel it, that means, it doesn't bother me anymore. And yet that can be problematic for a variety of reasons. Like how can somebody like control their mind like during hard times versus like just stuffing stuff down and letting it get the best of them?
So I think a lot of what happens, especially for men, is not even that they stuff it down. It's simply that they are not very good. Many are not very good. There's good literature on this, at recognizing the things that they're feeling. So what they tend to do is attach a broad label to everything. So this is a bit of a crazy example, but there's this guy on TikTok who dresses like a bush and then surprises people. Right? He dresses like a bush, stays still, and then stands up and surprises people. And when he surprises women, they often recoil and scream, and then they laugh when they realize there's no threat. Men is really interesting. They get surprised, and they often make a noise that doesn't feel very manly to them, a squeal or a squeak. And then they get furious because they're humiliated, and they haven't identified its humiliation, so they've just turned it right into rage. And so the thing you can do if you really want to help yourself is identify the things you're feeling first. What is it about this? I'm super disappointed I put so much effort in it. I'm not just rageful. I'm disappointed that this happened. I feel betrayed because I told a colleague that I really needed them to do this, and they said they would and they didn't, rather than just anger or something else or depression. I think that's what you have to do. Identify the emotions you're feeling, give yourself a time slot to feel them intensely, and then begin a plan of how you're going to do something better, not make the same mistake, not have the same error creep in, or whatever it is. It's not simple. This stuff lives in your brain. You can't control it in that way. But if you identify it, it at least makes more sense to you than just, I'm angry.
At the beginning of our conversation, you said like the biggest mental skill people need to master is dealing with like the mundane. If they want to like, outperform people, if they want to get ahead of everybody else, it's to embrace the boring stuff. What types of things should people be doing like throughout the day? If you were to like design a day for somebody, like how would you want them to organize their life to be successful?
So this is the first thing I'd say is this. Almost all the narrative out there about getting up at 5 o'clock and doing a shared meditation or something with somebody, and this is mostly nonsense. Meditation is great, but this idea that there's a structure to how you do it, it's got to be done a certain way. You've got to eat, wafers and take this or that supplement. Everybody will have a sense of a routine that works for them and then works in the context of their work and life. Fixed to it. I'm a morning person. I'm tired by 9 o'clock. I'm not at my best at that time. So catch me at 5. I'm going to be excellent through till 12 or 2. And then after that, you get less than the good meat. Know your schedule, stick to it. Do your hardest work when you are freshest. That's what you do. Build some habits, stuff that you just do habitually. And then this is not my work either, but the work of habit stacking. So I've got a bunch of multivitamins and stuff that as an old man I'm supposed to take in the morning. And I never did take them because they're in a different shelf, but I drink tea every morning. There will never be a morning when I don't. And so in the tea cupboard, I've put the stuff that I know. So put the most mundane stuff that you might forget, but it's simple to execute next to something that you know you won't forget. And you can start to build some habits for you that'll really make a difference. Reward yourself for mundane stuff. If I do some really boring work, I give myself a break. In front of me is like a little roof terrace, and I go out on there and I just sit because I've got amazing views of the city. I love it. That's my little reward for 10 minutes for doing this ultra boring thing that I didn't want to do. These techniques, it's almost childish, isn't it? It's almost like treating your inner child somehow, but it does work because we have to do this boring work and it doesn't get any easier just because we're older and adult.
You brought up something really interesting, and that's like these morning routines and the lies about that. I recently interviewed this guy he's probably right around my age, but he was told he wasn't going to make it in school, like was failing classes and has ADD and stuff, and he sold his candy company to Hershey for like tens of millions of dollars last year. And I remember him telling me, he's like, I had no morning routine. I didn't like put my phone down and focus work. He's like, I just did what worked for me. And I think that's just a really important message that like, you just have to do the thing. There's no perfect setup for success. The perfect setup is just consistency, in my opinion, just stacking those small things over time.
It is consistency. And also what we sometimes forget is that even this gentleman's routine that you were talking about was attuned to him, right? So he talks about no routine. I'm sure he would have had a routine of sorts. We may not have recognized it as a routine, but it worked for him. And so what he's done is reduce the friction. So if I tried to develop myself into an afternoon and evening person where I'm just at my best there, that will create friction and it'll be much more energy expensive than knowing who I am here. It doesn't mean I never have to work in the afternoons or evenings, but it just means I know how to focus my day to do the best for me.
Friction, it's a really interesting term because I think there's things in life that create friction and will actually make things harder. I mean, I think there's a lot of emphasis on things you can do. You've talked about the routine and that sort of thing. Like, what are some things that often get overlooked in people's lives that cause friction and prevent them from actually being able to perform the way they should?
Ooh, I'm thinking very much from my own personal frame here, but interaction with other people is energy expensive for me. It's totally worth it, but it's really energy expensive, and that causes friction. When I talk to people and they don't ask me the question they mean, or they don't answer the question I ask them, really frictionful for me. So that knowing the kinds of things that are going to tweak your nose, I think is an important thing to be aware of, and also to then help other people to be aware of it. And so that's what I do. I just try and set myself up. I've got a document that all my colleagues have that helps them to understand bits about me. It's not that I'm inflexible, but here are some things that would help you to understand why John wants this done this way or why I want something done that way. And it helps reduce the friction both for them and for me, that we have a better understanding. So I suppose maybe that's the key. Don't wander around with strangers and expect it to be without friction, because for most of us, being surrounded by strangers is the most frictional experience we can have. So instead, build relationships.
And understand yourself, like you just said. Like, I think that's the basis of this conversation, right? Is self-awareness around all this stuff. I mean, has there been anything that you've had to work on for yourself that comes to mind? Like you mentioned, like sending out this document for your team and for people you work with. Like, has there been anything where you've had to kind of like bend the rules for yourself because you knew it would lead to some level of growth?
Yeah, I mean, almost almost every month there is something now where I'm like, this is not serving me. It may be the thing I prefer, but it's not serving me. I'm almost, I think, finding ways to seek a bit more friction, because I don't know that everything being set up for my ease is necessarily the key to ongoing growth. But yeah, there's lots of things. The way my diary looks is I'm incredibly pedantic about it, and I've had to, as we've grown and got more people in, and more people have access to my diary and put stuff in it, I've just had to acknowledge that not everybody is going to get my system and do it exactly as I want. And if I want to make that work, I just have to embrace that none of these people are bad actors. They're just really busy people with very difficult jobs, and my part of it is only one tiny bit of it. So I embrace the fact that, and I know it's a very small thing, but these are the kinds of things that drive a lot of people crazy. And instead, you just have to take a breath and say, in the scheme of things, how important is this? That's why that reflection is so important. It's not just having stuff happen to you. It's revisiting and saying, what does that mean? Why was that important? What does that teach me about me? I think that's the key.
Do you think you chase friction because that was like a normal for you? Like when you played basketball, there was like just a lot of stress and tension and stuff.
I think more. Uh, I don't think I ever embraced the friction of playing basketball. I mean, the friction I experience now, the intellectual friction, the need to learn more things, I think that is a different thing. I am afraid, if there's anything that I'm afraid about personally, it's the closing down of my intellectual advancement. And I don't just mean getting cleverer, but the idea that my intellectual curiosity will be stunted because people are making my world more convenient for me. And so I suppose that's what I'm trying to avoid. I don't know that the book would have been written. I'm not sure that It's Not Magic would have been written had it not been for a really uncomfortable conversation with a number of my colleagues. And then a really uncomfortable process with one of my colleagues from the University of Exeter, who did a study on me to understand about this problem that we'd had, right? Which led to this book. And it's like, that's an example of how, if I'd have just had other people make my life frictionless, this wouldn't exist. This thought wouldn't have come to my mind in the first place.
That's so interesting. That's really cool that like you're able to kind of do that, because I think it's just you're just setting yourself up to be this constant evolution of yourself, which I think people are afraid of. I think so many people are afraid of change. And I think that's like one of the biggest things people must do if they want to outperform most people. Like, why do you think people are so afraid of changing themselves?
I mean, it's hard to change even when you know yourself. But if you don't know yourself, as we've been discussing, then it's a terrifying exploration into a land with no map and no compass. And so you can imagine how it's. What if I turn the corner and I see something that I hate? What if I turn the corner and I see a limitation I'd never imagined? What if I turn the corner of my own mind, right, my own psyche, and witness something that I'd not considered or reflected on before, and it frightens me? Yeah, I'm not surprised people don't embrace change. I don't always love change. There's lots in my life that is quite structured. It's just this one area of intellectual curiosity. I'm not going to be in better shape anymore. My knees hurt, my feet hurt. I'm not going to run and jump, and I haven't played or touched a basketball in 20 years. So the one area of my life where I can truly refine and almost treat it like that professional athlete mindset of constant advancement lest you be overtaken is my mind. And so I'm willing to endure a bit of friction for that.
And I think one of the problems with people not changing though is they like spend their life in pain. They spend their life in struggle because they didn't make the change. They didn't, go see the health professional. They didn't leave the relationship. They didn't leave that career. I mean, I can go on with countless examples of that. Um, like I think, given that context, like what do you think's the biggest lesson that most people learn like too late in life?
Whew. Um, you just brought to my mind that I think my approach so far has been quite middle class, right? Because there are a bunch of people who, through circumstances legitimately beyond their control, didn't get to make the choices they might otherwise have made. But I suppose the lesson that I think people don't learn is this idea of what we started with. There are choices within your control, and too many people allow those choices to either happen or not happen according to chance or luck, or they observe them as they pass without ever interacting with them, only to lament months, days, weeks, years later that they wish they could have. You and I have both met these people who say, oh, if only I wish I'd done this. Or, sometimes it's about an investment they could have made. Some of the things about a job they could have taken. Some of it's about a date they could have gone on. And I just think know that time is linear. It's not going to stop or go back for you at any point. So every single moment that's in your control, grab it, scrutinize it. And if you let it pass without doing anything, let that be a choice.
Something came to my mind that I've struggled with over the years when it comes to potential. Like you mentioned, we all met the person that says, I wish I would have done that. And, I've lived a lot of my life, recently being like, I don't want to get to the end and wonder what if. But for me, it's caused, some level of negativity. I mean, not that it brings me down, because it's like, well, am I doing enough? Like, am I really living to my full potential? And that's this battle that I've had is like, am I doing enough? And how do I know if I like take a step back and pause? Am I limiting myself, or am I actually taking a pause because I'm overworking myself? Right. So it's like, I've even had this internal battle. Like, what advice would you have for someone like myself?
So I think most of the ways that people talk about human potential are bollocks. I just think they're absolute nonsense. I don't know what my potential is in terms of my intellect, because the potential of the business is a little more contained because it involves a CEO who's got some nous and other people who can deliver. I don't know what my potential is, but what I do know is that I'm a human being and I'm older and I need rest. And I know that I'll never reach my potential without proper recuperation, not crashing, not kind of drinking my way to oblivion, but proper recuperation. And I think if you're wondering about your potential, ask yourself, have I ever constructed a plan about what it is I want to achieve? Because that's an indication of what you imagine for your potential. And if I have, is the activity that I'm doing today a strategic part of delivering on that? If you're taking a day off because you're tired, I think that's a strategic part of delivering on the outcome you want. If you're just taking all your days off, not starting till 11, finishing at 1, and hoping to achieve something remarkable, I think that's different. But I think it's easy for people to discern if you just look, here's the thing I want to achieve, and then I'm going to work back from that. What needs to be true? What needs to be true? What needs to be true today to get that?
Yeah, society has this interesting way of overcorrecting itself sometimes, right? Where it's like hustle culture became this huge thing where they're like, you got to work like 70, 80 hours a week to be successful. And then people realize, oh, like that's not sustainable if I want like, healthy relationships, healthy frame of mind, etc. But then it's like, well, let's just work like 5 hours a week, and it's like, well, you still have to like work hard and hustle to like build a business. Like you can't just sit on your couch and, you know, read some tarot cards and expect like, millions of dollars to fall in front of you, right? So it has to be this healthy balance.
So what people need for success is like the difference between speed and velocity, right? A lot of the hustle culture to me is just frenetic. It's about activity. And I have never been beaten on a basketball court in a corporate space by somebody who simply hustled a lot more than me, because effort on its own is not the answer. Effort, and that's the thing about velocity, it is speed with direction. It is a thoughtful use of speed. It's not just whirring around in a circle like your motorboat's wrong. It's thinking, this is my destination. This is how much fuel I've got. This is how I'm going to get there. It's a calculation. And that's what I do. I'm always thinking about what do I need to do. And sometimes it is my body that tells me I need to take a break. And sometimes it's my colleagues who notice my behavior and say I need to take a break. But I listen to the advisors in my head and outside of it.
So what does that look like a in a real time example, like a piece of paper? Like how can somebody like go from speed to velocity?
So let's have a piece of paper, and at the end of it, we're going to say, like, in a defined amount of time. Most people don't think past 3 years, even if they try to, because when they do, it's just fanciful then. So in a defined amount of time, think about the kind of life you want, and don't start with numbers. Start with things and experiences. Do you intend to have a partner? If you have a partner, do you intend to go on holiday? If you intend to go on holiday, where do you intend to go and how many times a year? Do you intend to have children? Do you intend to have pursuits and hobbies and whatever else? You start to do this, you can construct a world where a certain amount of money needs to be true, for example, for those people who are professionals that way. You can construct a world where certain kinds of qualifications might be necessary, or certain kinds of connections might be necessary. And then you can start to say, right, that's 3 years from now. And this is where I am today. I'm an accountant in a big four firm, and I want to have all this stuff in the future. And then there's a pathway for you that might be within your organization to the partnership, or it might be entrepreneurial or something else. There's loads of options, but at least now you know that this is where you want to get to. Some things need to be true for that. Some amounts of money need to be true, some kinds of qualifications, some kinds of connections. And then you can start thinking, today, what can I do to get those? Am I a part of any link? I mean, really simple stuff. Like, am I a part of any LinkedIn groups or professional associations that might give me these connections? It's this type of stuff. It's so mundane. I think that's why people find it so unsexy, because it's so dull. Right? These steps are dull, but cumulatively they get you to the top.
It's dull, and I think it's, you know, not sexy, and I think uncertainty is tough for people. I think there's a lot of people, especially when you're building a business, it's like you're in that like dark tunnel, and it's like you're walking, you're crawling, you're walking, you're crawling, you're like, crap, like where is the light? And then most people kind of give up when they're still in that state of darkness. And it's the people that just kept crawling, you know, mixed with maybe some opportunity and maybe some would call it luck or whatever, but they just kept going, and then the light is there. And I just think that's the hard part, is like dealing with the when will I see success? Like, what's your advice for that?
This is the strange example that just came to my head. If you look in the literature, when you talk to people about those people who got lost in the woods, those people who got caught on mountainsides or whatever else, it is not the most optimistic, randomly optimistic people who make it through. It's the people who understand that they have real purpose. They have something to get back for. And the thing for me is, these people who are mired in that kind of crawling, walking, can't see the light kind of space, they often don't have this. They know that there's a number they want to hit, or a sales figure, but they don't have this real sense of purpose, what I'm doing this for. And if they can keep that in their mind, I think it helps you to trudge through and continue to do the mundane thing of, in the darkness, despite bumping your face every 5 seconds, one step after the next step after the next step, with a relentless understanding that you're doing it for this purpose.
How do you view the term purpose? I know that's also something that's been kind of misused, used, where people feel like they have to like, you know, cure cancer in order to say they found their they found purpose.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be that deep. I was thinking about this the other day, because my organization's purpose is kind of my purpose. We want to help people thrive, usually in work, but in organizations. We want to help people thrive in work and help workplaces thrive. And we don't think those two things are in opposition. And I think I am supremely equipped to help people to thrive. And that involves not just be excellent at the thing that they're doing, but also find that balance that you talked about and have a life beyond it if they seek it, and find some idea of themselves without just defining themselves by the work that they do. And that's what I love to do. I love to help people to be successful. My first career was a study in the most unexpected person doing something they were never supposed to do. And I think lots of people have that potential. And I want to help them do that in their workplaces. So that works for me. And it's not precise, but the imagery of it is very strong for me. The sense when I'm talking to people and I'm having a difficult time with them and I'm not reaching them and it doesn't feel like it's working, the sense of commitment it gives me is strong. And I think most people can find something that works for them in that way without it having to be some multisyllabic kind of poetic thing. It can just be something quite simple. Help people thrive.
Yeah, and we're just living in this time right now, John. At least here, I don't know what it's like where you're at, but here in the States, it's people are just lost and they're like lonely and they're having a hard time like finding themselves and like they're like, do I have meaning? Like all these questions that they're asking themselves, like how can people even get from like that zero starting point to getting back to feeling like they matter and that they have some sense of like meaning in the world.
Yeah. This is a tough one because this involves a bit of vulnerability for everybody because I've been talking a lot. I did this piece kind of challenging some Scott Galloway's comments about masculinity and this epidemic of male loneliness. And although it sounds cruel, this is a self-imposed epidemic for us men. We are not lonely because of our genetics. We're not lonely because somebody else, whether it be women or anybody else, is making us lonely. We are deciding that an emotionally shallow life is what we're supposed to have. And we made that decision without even thinking about it when we were 12 or 13 or when our father or carer told us. And now it's reaping these consequences. And many men just don't want to say, why am I lonely? And acknowledge the fact that even that question makes tears rise to their eyes. And then they think, well, I can't cry. I think we have to ask ourselves some serious questions. If you are worried about your meaning to other people, if you're worried about your loneliness, ask yourself, why is this? Why is it even important to you? Why do you want to have meaning? And people are like, well, of course I want to have meaning, but why? Why wouldn't it be enough for you to just be hobbling along on your own? Oh, you're you're worried that you're insignificant if you aren't important to somebody. That's a place to start. What kind of people do you want to be important to? Where can you find them? How can you help them? For some people, I would imagine a decent kind of consequential volunteering job could have some massive impact on their sense of self, on their sense of personal meaning. There are ways of doing this that aren't rocket science.
Because what his theory is, as a man, you have to be strong, you have to prove that you can generate resources, and you have to be kind. I think, right? Or is that what you were kind of getting at? Is that as a guy, yeah,
His idea that you procreate, you're strong, and you're a revenue raiser. You bring in the money. These types of things, and none of that is real in contemporary Western society. None of that is real. It can be if you talk about it with your potential partners and they decide with you that that's the way they're going to split things. But that's not how most people split things. So if you're stuck in a design for manhood that was built for a time when half of us died of black lung, when most of us didn't survive tuberculosis, and you're surprised why in this modern world that doesn't work for us, that's why it doesn't work. And I'm not saying that men need to kind of become something else, but I am saying maybe we need to redefine what it is to be a man if we want to be taken seriously. Maybe we need to reconsider if what we're doing is killing us so certainly. Maybe we should consider why we endorse it so much. And it is killing men, right? It is killing men to be lonely. It is killing men to isolate themselves. And not just, by the way, from women, but from other men. In this country, there's this campaign where barbers are trained now to have mental health conversations with men who come in to get their beard trimmed and their face shaved and their hair done. And it's had this remarkable impact on people. I sit there, I'm not a talker at the barber, but I sit there and I listen to the conversations I had, and I feel so glad that these men, getting manly men with beards, are able to have this kind of conversation with somebody who gives a damn about them, even in that transactional way. And I'm sorry, if you can get that resource from a barber, then we deserve to be able to get that from lots of people who we aren't paying to.
We've covered so much great information in this interview. If you could leave the listeners with one challenge to transform their life starting today, what would it be?
Learn from the stuff you've already done. So many of us have lives with such interesting, difficult, challenging, amazing, and rewarding experiences that we never revisit to learn about us. We've been talking throughout this entire conversation has woven itself through self-awareness. But you can't know yourself if you don't revisit the experiences you've had, reflect on them to learn what they can teach you about who you are, what you have to offer, what your meaning and value and purpose in this world is. And all the people who are listening to this have enough of those experiences to learn a great deal in a short period of time.
Well, John, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. If people want to get a copy of your book, if they want to learn more about your work, where's the best place to do that?
So they can go to our website at www.apsintel.com, and there'll be a pop-up right there that'll give you the book, and I hope people will love it. And on LinkedIn, I am prolific. It is me. I respond. Please do join the conversation.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I love this conversation.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.